Hi, my name is Stella Nyanzi. I'm delighted that in spite of the COVID restrictions, I'm addressing this wonderful gathering entitled Locked Down, Locked In, the International Women Writers Conference for 2020. I'm seated in a plastic chair somewhere in the middle of Kampala city, the capital city of my country, and addressing this gathering of women writers who insist on writing in spite of the limitations brought to us by COVID-19. Prison was a very difficult time for me. It was very lonely, it was very scary, it was very uncertain, it was really dangerous. I was often accused by those who never knew the importance of articulation and expression freely in dictatorships such as Uganda, where I live. And PEN International empowered me greatly during my moments in prison of great isolation, where I was away from the world. I often received letters from writers all over the world, writers whose names I couldn't pronounce, writers whose language perhaps I don't speak, but writers who are standing in solidarity with me and sending messages of love and encouragement and support. When I was sentenced, when I was convicted, and a lot of people in the world were condemning me for having written Truth to Power, having written to a dictator, PEN International stood by me, offered solidarity and support, advocated for me, and gave visibility to my issue. I want to celebrate each individual as well as the different PEN collectives, the different national chapters, for insisting that my incarceration for writing freely against dictator Yoweri Museveni, who's the president of Uganda today, for insisting that that issue, my unjust incarceration, my unjust conviction and sentence would feature center stage in PEN International activities. I want to celebrate as well PEN Uganda, because I see a journey, I see maturity, I see growth. I was first incarcerated in Luzira Women's Prison, the only maximum security prison for women in Uganda. The first time I was detained there was 2017 because of a Facebook post that I wrote, and the reference for that post has popularly become the pair of buttocks case. In that case, I was accused of offensive communication against the president of Uganda because I use a metaphor of a pair of buttocks to address him. I approach writing as resistance, writing as rebellion, writing as a non-violent vehicle through which a largely disenfranchised, largely disempowered group of people can speak truth to power, can be critical, can speak dissent to those who abuse power in our different locations. And so when I was charged with offending Yoweri Museveni because I used a metaphor that likened him to a pair of buttocks, because in my view, he was shitting into the economy of Uganda, shitting into the finances of Uganda, shitting into the security and defense of Uganda, he was literally putting feces all over the governance and leadership of my country. And so for me, I very cheekily used the metaphor of a pair of buttocks. I was writing in my local language, Luganda, and it was an appropriate metaphor. The director of public prosecution in my country applied to the court in which I was judged to subject me unjustly to a mental exam to establish my sanity. It was as though Uganda was saying that one must first fall mad in order to freely express themselves about the bad governance, the lawlessness, the corruption, the excesses of a dictator who has been in power for over 35 years. And so, in that moment when I spent 32 days at Luzira Women's Prison, Hen, Uganda was not active in the prisons as yet, not to my knowledge. However, in 2018, when I was arrested, retried, redetained in the same prison facility, I found a vibrant community of poetesses, of novelists, of writers among the women prisoners who had been empowered by PEN Uganda to write their stories. When I was in prison, I was tortured many times because I was the woman who was questioning the systems of abuse in prison. When I was tortured and the pain was too much to bear, I would get a stone and write graffiti into the walls, scratch resistance slogans into the walls of the solitary confinement cells where I was locked up. When I had a miscarriage of my baby in prison and the pain of being a detained mother who has perhaps failed in her role of motherhood, I went to writing poetry. I went to writing my pain out of my system. I went to writing in order to make meaning out of that pain that one cannot share with another. When I was shamed by undressing publicly by prison wardresses who feel that the only way to minimize the subversive power of an adult woman is to physically undress and make her nude and parade her around the wards, it was often to writing that I took my shame. And so writing has been a powerful tool for me, in which I continued even in prison because there's a high level of surveillance, especially when I revealed to the prison wardresses and the prisoners that I was actually documenting the stories and lives of prisoners. They thought I was writing a book with chapters, but indeed I was writing poems. I find that poems can be a short medium through which the entirety of a story is carried. And so when I realized that there was a vendetta, there was a mandate, there was a strategy, an institutionalized methodology of confiscating my poetry and destroying the poems, I began sneaking out one by one each of the poems that finally made it to the book. This is about a third of the poems that I wrote in prison. Some of them are too critical of individuals in the prison system, in the court system, in detention, the police facilities, for them to be published and for me to stay alive. I want to mention the pride and joy I feel about having received the Oxfam Nove Pen Award for 2020.